The passage this morning, it's kind of the new year, and I've started to work through just what I would call basic stuff. And the question this morning, as we've begun the new year, what does it mean to be a follower of Christ? I think when Jesus talks to us in his gospel today, and Jesus is going to astonish and he's going to shock people. He is going to astonish and shock people because he enters church, at least in the Gospel of Mark, for the first time. And he's going to shock and astonish people because he's going to kind of rethink why we show up to church. Why do we show up to church? What do we expect when we come and we meet with the people of God? And I think it's a question we all have. You might even ask, why am I here this morning? Or what is it that you're expecting this morning? Jesus' first time in church, people showed up expecting something, and they got something else. That when Jesus shows up, he kind of shatters our expectation of what even church is. And I thought this morning, even if I was sharing in the first service, that in a way, I'm having to do what I don't think Jesus would necessarily do in church. Jesus, because I'm going to actually talk, I'm going to try to answer the question, what are we expecting when we're here? Jesus just showed up and did it and then shocked everyone. I will say this as we start out, we are all spellbound with something. In the book of Galatians, Paul writes and says to people who were in a church, who's bewitched you, who's cast you under their spell. And they were religious people that had cast people under their spell. And so you can be under the spell even of religion, or by the end, it says in our passage that people were spellbound by Jesus. That what Jesus did was so other and so different that it shocked, it amazed, and it captured the people who were in church that particular day. And so what's grabbing you? Where are you located this morning? What grabs your conscience? What holds your conscience? We all have consciences this morning. Sometimes we feel bound by them and enslaved to them. But what holds you? What's binding you this morning? And Jesus assumed when he showed up at church that people were bound. He didn't assume they were free. He assumed they were bound. And sometimes I think we show up at church and think people are free, and so the message is meant to bind them. So you're free, but you got to hear from me so that I can keep you under control. I need to bind you and from being something. Jesus assumed you're already bound, and he came to church to set you free. And so we're going to talk about that this morning. So we're all bound by something. Something's grabbing your conscience, a relationship, a health diagnosis, a job, relationship with parents, relationship with kids. Something is just holding you and speaking into your mind this morning, telling you you're not enough, telling you you're doing it wrong, telling you that Jesus will never love you. Something is grabbing you this morning. And Jesus came to church to set you free. I hope that's what we are here to do, not to bind you, and let you know that Jesus has come and you're free. So what's spellbounding you this morning? I'm going to start with the epistle reading, and I'm just going to say it real quickly here. Paul was writing to a church that was divided. Lots of things were binding them and whatever. But I think one of the reasons maybe you came to church here this morning is that you thought that you came here to church so that some guy or woman up here would give you knowledge. And then you could take that knowledge and do better at your life. And love your neighbor better, whatever it is you think, that you came, and that's what we do at school, right? You're supposed to go to school, and then you're supposed to learn, and then someone will teach you, you will apply what you learn, and you will be better at your vocation, you will be better at reading, writing, and arithmetic, or whatever it is that they're trying to train you in school to do. You're there to learn knowledge, and with that knowledge, you are going to do something with that knowledge. We assume in our world, in the kingdom of this world, that we gain knowledge and that knowledge will set us free. If we just had somebody smart enough. It's why when you go to some churches, either you'll see the name of the pastor, or and if the name of the pastor is important, it's, I'm not a doctor, like I haven't got that much education, but you'll see Dr. Brad Bresson. Well, I want to go there because why do I want to go there? Because he went to school, he knows things, he's going to help me be smarter and better. Paul realizes that. And so he's writing this group of people in his church, and I just want to read it briefly, because I don't think we're here this morning to gain knowledge. So go ahead and hit the first slide. Knowledge puffs up. They're wanting to know. They wrote Paul a letter, and this, I'm not going to go into it, and I hate to do this because I'm not preaching on this text, but they got idols, and meat is being offered to idols. So the first verse, I don't have one up here, is they're wanting to know, should they eat meat offered to idols? They want to know, they want Paul in their letter to teach them what they should do. Should we eat meat that's been offered to these pagan idols, or should we not? Paul says this, you got a wrong assumption here. You're seeking knowledge, but knowledge, it puffs us up. But loving each other, no matter whether you eat the meat that's offered to idols or whether you don't, that actually builds each other's up. So I'm not interested in that. And honestly, if you're getting this letter from me so that you can know something and you think you know something, well, you haven't learned yet. You haven't learned that if you think you know something, you really don't know as you ought to know. Isn't that what the church, the church ends up being the place where we think we got it all figured out, and other people don't, and we think we know something, and Paul says, if you come to church to think that you can know something, you haven't really learned anything. Because the issue isn't what you know. The issue, Paul says, is that God knows you. That's the important thing, that God knows you. It's to be known by God. No matter who you are and what you've done, that's what matters, is that God knows you. And so Jesus kind of erupts onto the scene with this thought in mind. So let's go to the gospel text this morning. I'm going to just read I cannot put the mic down. So next week I should have my thing back, but I'm still getting used to holding this particular mic. They went into Capernaum, and immediately on the Sabbath, he entered. I'm just going to hang on this slide. I'm not going to read it all the way through. I'm going to read it all the way through, but I'm going to talk because I think this is in two parts. He went into Capernaum, and immediately on the Sabbath, he entered the synagogue and was teaching. This is the Gospel of Mark, chapter 1, verses 21 through 28. Mark immediately, he's quick, he's short in what he does. He immediately tells us that Jesus entered a synagogue on the Sabbath. I think these are terms we throw around, but what does Sabbath mean again? I've asked this before. What does Sabbath mean? Rest. He entered church on the day of rest. So would it be surprising that when Jesus opens his mouth, that he offers rest? He offers rest. Now, why do we expect when we come to church? Do we expect rest, or do we expect the person, and I'm not Jesus, I may be his instrument, you are his instrument, but do we expect rest? Sometimes I think we come to church and we hear a good sermon and we actually say, well, the good sermon made me anxious. It made me anxious. I mean, I grew up in a tradition that we argued about what you could actually do on Sundays. Could you play baseball? In my home, this is this terrible I am, and I can't remember everyone who's here, but in my home, on Sundays, one of the great things and best days on Sundays for real estate agents is to show houses. Well, I don't know if I was raised in a tradition, or I don't know if you should be a real estate agent because you have to show houses on Sunday. And so instead of Sunday being a day of rest, it's all anxious. It's like, am I doing Sunday right? Am I doing this right? And the last thing that Sunday was, can I watch the Ravens Chiefs this afternoon? Is that allowed? Sabbath means rest. And when the people of God, even in the Old Testament, certainly in the New, were gathered, it was to remind, you can go all the way back to creation. What was the end of creation? Rest. God made everything. He said it was good, and he rested. He offered rest. The whole goal of God's creation is what? Rest. So why do we come to church? Do you come to church expecting to be given a place of rest? Or do you come to church expecting something else? Jesus is going to shock those who showed up in the synagogue. They were surprised at his teaching. His teaching was way different than literally it says in the text, the teachers of the law. His teaching was way, way different. It doesn't say that Jesus came to do a better job teaching the law than the teachers of the law. The contrast is here is it was a new teaching, and we'll say that later in the text. This is something vastly different than the teachers of rules, than the teachers of the law. And it was so different that it shocked and it amazed and it surprised people who were in church on that Sunday, or Saturday, sorry. We're in the old world still here at this particular time. He spoke with authority and so confident, but it also tells us that Jesus wasn't interested in arguing. He wasn't interested, and we're going to see this in a second, he wasn't interested in theological arguments. He didn't quibble. He didn't quote like the religious scholars, teachers of the law did. He just came and he showed up and he began to work and act in such a way. And these people showed up expecting someone to talk about the Torah and the Old Testament, the books of the law. They were expecting to learn in the synagogue. The synagogue was actually groups of places and meeting places that were created as people. You know why synagogues were created? This is ironic to me. It's not ironic to Jesus. You know why synagogues were created in the Old Testament? Because people had failed to observe the law. God had sent people into exile. They were no longer near Jerusalem, and they needed a place, and they wanted to get better at doing the law because they thought that might bring them back as to one people. They were there because they hadn't, so how are we going to get back to where we want to be? We're going to create teaching centers called synagogues where we're going to learn the law so that we'll be able to better observe observe and do all that God commanded, and maybe we'll get back to the other place. The problem with these synagogues is they just were that. That's all they were, is they were teaching places. Guess what the temple had that the synagogues didn't have? Sacrificial sacrifices for forgiveness of sins. They thought their path back was through knowledge. And their quest for obedience to the law left them devoid of the sacrifices that were needed for the forgiveness of sins. And Jesus shows up in the middle of that. And he surprises them. They had moved toward knowledge and away from the sacrifices for the forgiveness of sin. They felt like they could leave smarter. Well, someone just come and teach us how to get over the line, how to get better. But what they didn't realize that was the pattern in their life is the work of all the rules and even God's law is always to judge and condemn you, right? It's to judge and condemn you. I mean, God's law is holy, and it is perfect, and it is righteous. It is holy, perfect, and righteous, and no one keeps it. And so that is the law doesn't give you rest. Rules don't give you rest. You never find rest in those. I mean, it is the Sabbath day. I already said, how do you keep the Sabbath holy? You would go to synagogue and try to find out, and they had all these laws. I mean, they couldn't take the ox in the ditch, and those are other places in scriptures. Other places in scriptures. Here's the problem with rest and the law. Just take the Sabbath. Just even use the examples I gave about traditions and places I grew up. Should I play baseball? Should I watch TV? Should I show a home on the Sabbath? Jesus comes with a new authority. If I were to say you came here to learn and be educated so that you could better keep the Ten Commandments, and I told you, you would need to be wary of me, but I told you that you shouldn't show houses on the Sabbath, and you shouldn't watch the Ravens and Chiefs this afternoon, and say that was right, say those were right things. Where does the authority of the law then rest? It rests in you. Are you going to do it, or are you not going to do it? All of the authority and the capability rests in you. Are you going to do it, or are you not? Jesus comes with a new teaching and a new authority. And it shocks people. It scares, it frightens people. Because he's taking the authority away from you and I, and he's giving it to himself and his work and what he has done. And that is what matters. There's a huge difference between what Jesus teaches and what they do, and they are astonished, not only because of what he is teaching, but how he is teaching. Can I say this, the gospel, the good news of Jesus Christ? It is so shocking and so astonishing and so fearful that it will make you shriek. And therein lies the rest of the story. Because he's going to give a living, breathing example of what he came to do in church, and maybe, just maybe, what we are all about in church. It's in his miracle. It's the next slide. And immediately there was in their synagogue a man with an unclean spirit, a lying spirit, a spirit that held this man bondage. It paralyzed him. We know from other gospels that this maybe had been going on a long time. we know from another Gospels that this man, this is ironic, who was at rest in worship in the synagogue while all the scribes were teaching the law? You know who was at rest? The demon. The guy had come from years. Listening to people actually teach the Torah, and he never shrieked once. Never shrieked at all. Never shrieked under the teaching of God's Torah. Never shrieked under the teaching of, this is what you learn and this is what you must do. Never shrieked once. But when Jesus shows up with his new teaching, with his good news, the demon, the evil spirit that was at rest, shrieked. He shrieked at the awfulness, at the astonishment of what Jesus was teaching. Because now the thing that the evil lying spirit had done to keep this man in bondage for all of these years, it wasn't threatened by the law. In fact, he probably was using the law to keep this man in bondage where he was at, because that's what the law does. It tells us we're in bondage. But all of a sudden, Jesus shows up and he knows that he is in trouble. He's in trouble. And immediately there was in the synagogue with a man, and he cried out, and we're going to know what he cried out. But in a sense, there's two things going on. There's the man crying out, but there's also the demon and the evil spirit that's controlling the man who cried out. But in a sense, the man cried out and said, I want to be free. But when he cries out, the evil spirit actually talks. And he says to Jesus, what business do you have to do with us? The evil spirit says. And the man is saying to that himself, maybe in being in bondage so long, Jesus, you can't do anything with me. You can't do anything with me. I know you who you are, the Holy One of God. Now, that's loaded, right? Because the demon, the evil spirit, just gave us perfect theological truth. Jesus is the Holy One of God. Jesus is both God and both man. And I don't know how many times I've engaged this passage, and you can actually go to this passage and say, you know what, the demons even believe stuff that we don't believe. This passage is certainly a passage where the demon is telling us that there are two natures of Christ, that he is both God and he is both man. But if you actually listen closely to what the demon is saying, he's trying to throw Jesus off track. I mean, Jesus could have said, touche. What a great opportunity. Look, people in the synagogue, I am here to teach you that I am both God and both man. And I even got a demon to say it. Let's talk about theology, Jesus could have said in church. But he didn't. The lying spirit, the man is crying out to be free. The lying spirit actually affirms Jesus, but Jesus is not interested in a theological conversation. Jesus isn't going to take the bait to have a theological conversation, because you know what Jesus came to church to do, and all he sees when he is in church is he sees someone who needs to be set free, and he's not going to talk theology. He's there to set people free. That's why he's there. He's there to set people free. He's more interested in this oppressed man's freedom than a theological debate. That's what Jesus did in church. That's all I'm doing. Just sharing what Jesus did in church. It was a perfect opportunity for him to say, yes, I am the Holy One of God. Perfect opportunity. But what does he say? Jesus says, you are the Holy One of God. Listen, he just uttered, the evil spirit just uttered a perfect theological truth that Jesus is God, and Jesus tells him, what are the first words after the evil spirit said to Jesus something that was theologically true? Jesus told the evil spirit to shut up. Shut up. I mean, didn't the spirit just tell Jesus exactly who he is? And yet Jesus tells the spirit to shut up. I mean, this is an evil spirit. It is a demon. Do we have visitors this morning? But can I say, it is an evil spirit. This evil spirit is demonic, coming from the pits of hell. That if we didn't just need to sell Bibles, this is what Jesus said. This is what Jesus would say in Homosassa to this evil, lying spirit. Shut the hell up, literally. Hell, will you shut up? Will you shut up? Be silent and come out of him. And the unclean spirit, convulsing him and crying a loud voice, came out of him. I will say this again, and I will say this till the day I die up here. When God says, let there be light, there is light. And when God says to Lazarus and John, come forth out of the grave, he comes forth. When God says to this demon, Jesus says to this demon, come out, he comes out. And to echo what our assurance was, and I will always bring it to this point, when he says that your sins are forgiven, they are forgiven, because what he says happens. Because he has authority to do it. Why we cast aspirations and doubts on that very truth in our lives, we become the impetus of lying spirits. There are many of you this morning, I will include myself in this. There are many of you, myself included, with a lying spirit that wants to tell Brad, are you really forgiven? I mean, you know what you've done. You know your past. You know your present. That lying spirit, I think, is in all of us. And sometimes we come to church and we actually feed that lying spirit. Like, my goal all of a sudden is to make you question whether you've been forgiven or not. That's not my role. If God says you're forgiven, you're forgiven. I'm a lying spirit if I make you question that. And is that what church, is that what we came to church for? Is to begin to wonder if God's really forgiven us? The unclean spirit came out from him, and it shrieked. It shrieked that Jesus could just say a word to make this man clean. I mean, these teachers of the law, they end up crucifying Christ, because in this moment at the beginning of Jesus' ministry, with Jesus' authority, he has actually put all of them out of a job. If Jesus can just say this, and the demon comes out, and this man is clean, and that is whole, I thought my role was to help make you clean and whole. But what if that's not my role? What if my role is just to give you the promises of God? The Spirit says to Jesus, what business do you have to do with me? And you may be here this morning. I don't know your past. You may not have a long past. You may be young. You may be in church for the first time. You may say, Jesus, what will you have to do with me? Why would you do anything with me? Why would you do anything with me, Jesus, pastor? Why would you use an adulterer? Why would you use a selfish person. Why would you use? What do you have to do with me, Jesus? And Jesus is saying to this man, I have everything to do with you. There's no one outside my reach. There's no one outside my promise. There's no one outside the word that I give you to make you whole. Jesus is saying to this man, I have come to possess what possesses you. I've actually come to possess myself, what possesses you. He who knew no sin became sin, that we might become the righteousness of God. He's come to possess my lust. He's come to possess our rage and our anger. He's come to possess your pain. He's come to possess your illness. Haunted by your past, you may be here this morning and saying, Jesus, what are you, do you have anything to do with me? I may be in church for the first time. Like, is that enough? I don't know. You don't care. You don't care. It's only religious people that care. He doesn't. No one, you included, is outside his reach. So Jesus is here this morning and he's asking, where do you spend your time? Where do you locate yourself in your mind? Do you locate yourself in your mind under condemnation, under the law, and let it have its way with you, its righteous, holy law? Is that where you locate yourself? Is your conscience tormented about whether you've been good enough, whether you've done enough, whether you've raised your children well enough, whether you loved mom and dad well enough? Is your conscience tormented by something you did this week? And Jesus has come, and he's saying that's not where you're located. You're located in Christ. Read the epistles. In Christ, in Christ. You couldn't even this week take all the time to find out all the times that St. Paul says that we are in Christ. Over and over again. That is your home. That is your location. It frees us. These truths have been truths that have freed me. You know, in a world, Betty Grant was in the first service, and before the first service even started, she grabbed me, and she said, Brad, I want you to know that I never even knew that Jesus loved me till I walked through the doors of this particular church. That's a shame on the Church of Jesus Christ. It's a shame. Jesus comes with his word and his promise, and we're bound. Our consciences are bound. But I'm here to tell you this morning that your conscience will never be freed because I give you a set of facts. Because facts and knowledge cannot set you free. The only thing that can set you free is the promise of Christ. So I am here to give you the promise week after week after week. It's the only thing. You may have come here this morning hoping I would say something that would set you free, that would give you some sort of special knowledge, some sort of gnosis, as so many people in the churches were doing, that would set you free. Only Jesus, he who knows the Son will set free indeed. I give you Jesus. I give you his word. I give you his promise over and over and over again. It's what my heart longs to do. It's why we do church. Do you know that almost 49% of the world is on social media? Now, that's a problem. But can I also say to those this morning who have been listening online, which are increasing more and more, even in numbers there, that the reason we have chosen to be on social media is because the world is bound and enslaved. And if 50% of the people are on social media, then by golly, I'm going to give the promises of Christ all over social media. It's why we do what we do. Because you didn't come here this morning free. There's not a person in this room that in every part of their life came here this morning free. You came here bound, guilty, feeling guilt. You could have done it better. And no matter what I would say, could never undo your past. It can't undo your present. And it won't undo the poor choices of your future. But the promises of Christ will hold you fast. Everyone there was spellbound with his teaching. Here's the truth. It's not just me. It's you too. Derek reminded me that it was in my notes, and I forgot to say this morning and at the first service, but I guess it was reserved for being here in this service and for people who are online. You may be visiting this morning. You may have been here a long time. Last week I said I was the town crier. You're the town crier. And all we do is go out in the streets announcing that our King has won. Our King has won. The victory has been secured, and we are his. What is a follower of Christ? I'll take this label as myself, and I'll give it to you. I know it may make you cringe. I may know that you may want to share it, but you know what I am every week? I am an exorcist. Oh my word. I am here to take whatever is ringing in your ear and say that's a lying spirit and ring the promises of Christ in your ear. And I know, you went to that Nature Coast church and the pastor said he was an exorcist. But here's the real kicker. So are you. And you will run into your own self this week. You will run into people that are bound in their decision, and their decisions are being held, and they're being held by lying spirits. And you too get to tell people that there is nothing, not on heaven, not on earth, not angelic, not demonic, that will ever separate you from the love of Jesus Christ. That is in Jesus Christ. You are here this morning to say that there is a promise from God that he will never leave you and he will never forsake you. You are here to ring in someone's ear that Jesus has come. And yes, you live in this world where you haven't fully obeyed. You haven't done all of those things. And people are paralyzed by that. There are people that can't serve in the church. I remember a year or so, two ago, a woman online was in a chat group I'm in, a theological chat group, I'm weird that way. But she was actually having a lunch with a friend to share with that friend about Jesus. And she writes in the online group that she canceled that lunch because she had failed miserably that week, and now she wasn't able to tell that person about Christ. That is a lying spirit. That girl and that woman has never been more prepared to share the love of Jesus Christ. In her failure, she's never been more prepared, because as she goes and shares Christ with that person, she shares her own desperate need for Christ. That is the promise of God ringing in her ear, not the lying spirit that says you're not good enough. Of course we're not good enough to share Christ, but we are because of him. And I am not here to share my good works. I don't bear witness to myself. I bear witness to Christ and him alone. Jesus plus nothing equals everything. That was the message of Christ in his first worship service. And I know that message gets hit, but it gets hit by lying people, because the only thing that will set you free, and if someone tells you Jesus plus nothing equals everything is a bunch of hogwash or there's something more, it's a lying spirit, because the only thing that will set you free is Jesus plus nothing equals freedom forever and ever and ever. That's the only thing that will set you free. And any attack on Jesus plus nothing equals everything, no matter how religious the people are, is from the pit of hell. Because it's the only thing. It's why people shriek when they hear Jesus plus nothing equals everything. And if you've been here long enough, you've heard people shriek at that message. It's the only thing that will set you free. It's why, if it's not true, I quit. I've already done everything else. I quit. I don't just quit preaching. If Jesus plus nothing was everything, I throw the whole bag of Christianity out. It's not worth it. I can't do it. It has set me free. It can set you free too. And you know what? We have amnesia. If you're helping serve the Lord's table, if you would come up this morning and just go ahead and grab and go to your station here this morning. It's the only thing that we have amnesia. We have amnesia. And in that amnesia, we forget. And Jesus says, I'm going to want you to do this till I come again. I want you to be reminded that my broken body is for you and my shed blood is for you. And if you're visiting this morning, you may think, well, I've been to many churches and I don't know if I should come up. All right, who made the rules? This isn't Nature Coast table. It's not my table. It is Christ's table. And it's for you. It is for you to come and partake. And you say, well, maybe I don't know. I don't know about this Jesus that you talked about. And I don't know if I really know him. Can I just beg you that for the first time in your life, come meet him in his broken body and shed blood. You don't need to meet with the committee. You don't need to meet with me to see if you have been okay and you've been anything. If you want Jesus, come. He's offering himself to you in his broken body and shed blood. He is saying to you, in my body and my blood, I want to set you free. I want to set your conscience free, that I have done this for you. I've done it for my people. So if you're here and you want to come, don't even say this is the first time and I don't know. If you just want to meet Jesus for the first time, come. Just come and meet him. As we do communion, our closing song, they're actually going to say, you say again, sing, you say again. Listen to the lyrics of this song. Certainly you can sing along, but receive them. It's the whole message. I say this about myself, that's the lying spirit. I say I am weak. He says I am strong. It's the whole message right here in this song. And every lyric where we talk, it's a lie. The truth is in what he says. And the only thing that will ever set you free is what he says, because faith comes by hearing, and hearing the word of Christ. This is for you.